Okay, we're on the air. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and once again, this is Skywire. Goes everywhere. Out beaming all over the world. We're so happy to be here with our message that we bring to you each and every week about listening and how we take listening on so many different levels because it is on so many different levels for us to pay attention to. So I want to thank you all for being here with us today. And for those of you that are tuning in and you didn't watch us live, we're delighted to have you whenever you come. And please always feel free to comment yeah, on YouTube or wherever you're seeing this because we want to hear from you. I want to welcome everybody that is watching live. It's always good to have you as part of this whole thing. And I want to say hello to Sheila, Marguerite, Katrina, Jamie. Hello. We have our first man who says he's going to stay. Gail and Heidi, we're so delighted to have everybody here with the subject today of talking about courage and then, of course, vulnerability. And how does our listening support our ability to be courageous and, of course, being vulnerable? So it's really exciting to be here. And one of the quotes that came to me this week, one of the ideas, messages that came, I turn them all into quotes, is that hearing is a snapshot, but listening is a full-blown movie. So keep that in mind each and every day, that hearing is just a snapshot of what's going on. But if you really want to play and you really want to play the game of life, get into listening because you're going to see the full-blown movie. So with that, I'm going to say hello to Katrina. Good morning. How are you doing, Katrina?
I'm doing well this morning, Marilyn. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. So tell everybody who you are, and then would you introduce Jamie?
I certainly can absolutely do that. Let's see, this morning, I am a creative, open-hearted being that's excited to dig deeper into courage and listening. So that topic's been coming up a lot for me this week, so I'm really excited to talk about that.
Great.
And as for introducing Mr. Jamie, speaking of courage, I actually started a call last year out of the blue just about creativity, and for some reason I was just really guided to invite him on Google Plus. We were kind of catching up on a few things. We'd like each other's stuff, and I was like, hey, he seems like a really interesting person. I kind of want to know a little bit more. So I took the leap and invited him to come, and we've been friends ever since. So for the last year I've been connecting with Jamie, and it's been really fun. We talk about a lot of different things, but his specific area of focus and passion is spiritual coaching. And I'm sure, towards the end he can fill you in a little bit more about that. But it's been really fun getting to know him, and he's got such a great perspective on how to really tune in and to get in touch with what spirituality, what spiritual path is right for you.
Cool. Perfect. So, Jamie, welcome. So nice to have you here. And one thing I will say is I got to spend a few minutes with Jamie before we actually went live and before everybody else showed up. And you just spend a few minutes with Jamie, and you are like a beam of information. I became a beam of information, a beam of messages just by being in his company because of what, I don't know, your presence elicits things, brings things into the surface. So I want to thank you for that. So Jamie,
Mhm.
who are you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your warm welcome, and I'm really excited to be here to be involved with this conversation. Um, who am I? I am very much I would say a spiritual traveler. I've been on a long journey through my spiritual discoveries. I have a background, a monastic background. I was a monk for many years, and I am presently discovering how to kind of put into practice the kind of deep, profound spiritual insights I had, how to put that into practice in the kind of everyday world. Um, I like combining sort of psychology as well with spirituality. And it's interesting. I've gone through sort of many points where I thought I knew a lot about spirituality, and then you kind of realize, actually, I know so little in comparison to what there is still to learn. And I'm always discovering new things. It's been fantastic meeting Katrina because she's kind of helped me to kind of see how I can discover new ways about connecting with my spirituality and expressing my creativity as well. So yeah, in many ways, I feel kind of like a young child discovering new toys in the realms of spirituality and creativity. So yeah, that's me in a few sentences.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, I think we have to make you the subject of one of our shows because I, for one, want to know more about how you go from being a monk, probably the cutest monk there was, to being a non-monk. I mean, so I'm going to want to know more. So we're going to have to get on that subject.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an interesting. So hold tight. So Heidi, I love how you always start us also off on a whole new realm of who you are, which always takes me to who I am. So who were you this week?
Oh, this week I was somebody who was quite excited about things, which I did, but also quite challenged of many other things which didn't want to come out. And all this technical stuff. Before it didn't work, now it works. And to come in, I lost the picture, here, our Google Hangout picture twice, and to find it back. And for me, it seems to be that I am asked to become quiet and not go into panic and just see, okay, things are as they are and what can I do? And then quietly going on and doing this. And I think this is a big learning for me. It's maybe I'm now becoming a little bit better in it. And I'm happy that I'm here, that I have made it, and even the camera works. So thank you.
Yeah, I hear you. Heidi, not Heidi, I'm sorry, Gail.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so who am I? Well, right now I'm calm, I'm peaceful, I'm content, and it's the first time I've been feeling that way in quite some time. So I'm really just taking it in, and I'm feeling really happy to be here. And that's it for now.
Okay, that's more than good.
Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Margarita, welcome. Hey. So who are
Hi.
you? Yeah.
Who am I?
Yes,
I
this
feel
week.
like I am white space. I was in bed for the last few days with humongous headaches, and my mind was I couldn't hear anything or see anything, and I just retreated to bed. So I'm coming out of a sequence of white space. Maybe this is a learning for me to actually listen better. I don't know. That's all what I can say.
Wow. Everybody's having so unique experiences. That's really interesting. And we're all being called.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So Sheila, what about you?
Today, and I didn't expect this, and it is due to Jamie, today I am a teacher. What I love to do best, because when we came in and we were setting up everything, he said he was interested in it, and I automatically went into, without even thinking about it, teaching him, because we were early and we had time, and it was such a feeling of joy for me. So I just allowed it, and I am basking in it. Thank you, Jamie. I will now be after you to let me teach you more. So it's what I do. It was very, very much a feeling of joy.
So before I say anything about myself, I want to ask you one question. So how many times have you been told that you were a teacher? Or how many times has somebody said, "Oh, you're a teacher"?
I don't know that anybody ever has. I've just always known it. I've just always known it. So, and it started with animals and training animals and communicating with animals and people. But no one has ever really called me a teacher.
So this is the first time you've acknowledged it?
Oh no, I own a school,
Okay,
and
so
I'm
you okay,
certified, and
right,
yeah,
okay.
that's my profession. That's what I really get joy out of. But on Google Plus, I seldom get to exercise that. Well, here I seldom get to exercise that because I'm more in the background. I'm doing the technology. So,
Okay,
but what I really, really love to do is teach people what I know about this,
okay.
and I will teach anyone, and I will do it with such joy. So,
Yeah.
Jamie gave me joy this morning.
Okay, good.
So I'm full of
Good.
joy. And
Good.
may I say, I think Margarita just needed rest. So you got 2 days of rest. I'm sorry your head hurt. And Gail, you are so calm. I expect you to blast out any moment with a profound something or other. I cannot wait. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm this every week when these subjects, and I don't plan them,
Mm,
but they're for me, just like I mean, I hope and pray that they're for everybody else because it's something always faces me. After before, that's how they come, or like last week it came up. Somebody said courage, and we went on it, and then afterwards, it takes me on such a ride, and I've had to do something that really took courage for me to face somebody or to face a situation that I didn't want to face. But because of the awareness of courage being in my psyche in this last week, because of preparing for the show, I found myself being able to do something. It gave me a nice gentle push to be able to do something and address something in a way with love. Being vulnerable to somebody else's something that if it wasn't for this, I might not have done that way. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have come to me as easily or as quickly as it did. So I'm really, really grateful for that because I know the word and I've heard the word before and I've listened to its actions and reactions. But as we do this, my awareness of listening is even keener. And so now that word is bigger now. It has more definition attached to it because of the awareness and the depth of listening that we're taking it. So I really appreciate all of that. Before I go on, Sheila, do you have any comments or anything that we want to pay attention to?
I want to acknowledge Nancy Long. Both Heidi and I have commented back to her. She's unable to get audio or visual. She's very disappointed. And Heidi mentioned that she should reboot. I hope she does. I do wish I could put your quote up on the in Comment Tracker, but we don't get visuals like that in Comment Tracker. So
What is the quote?
the quote is, and let me scroll back down to it, courage, right? Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow.
Okay, so that's a
I
great
like
place
that.
so that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
So why don't we start going down, Heidi? Talk about courage. You could talk about the quote or listening and courage and the connection. What does all of that mean?
Yeah, when I was thinking about the topic which Jamie Lelton the other week has brought up, no, that listening is about courage. And I'm sorry, I have a cat here which is, I don't know if you see her, she's biting my arm.
Well, she's courageous.
She is courageous, and I'm courageous to try to get her off with these claws. Mark, yeah, can you take him? That's good, because I would like to talk about courage. Thank you.
My arm.
Yeah, she can chew on his arm. Okay, I was thinking about my life when I had courage. At least it was, people told me, you are very courageous. And every time I thought, am I courageous? I don't know. I only have listened to what was on, listened to what was my next step, listened to what I needed to do, and then I did it. But I actually never felt that it was courageous. I just did it. So I cannot add anything else. It's just for me, often what other people perceive as courage, for yourself, maybe it's not. It's just natural. That's my experience.
That's a really interesting point because does courage, where does courage live? Is it in the ego or is it in the soul and the heart? I mean, where does it live? I mean, if you acknowledge being courageous, what are you acknowledging? So that's a really interesting uh, that's really interesting. It's making me think because like yesterday when I had to be courageous into today, where was it for me? It was the tip of being vulnerable, but where was it? So I have to think about that because I didn't feel like it was in my ego. I felt like I had to bring something to the present to be able to do this. So that's really interesting. Gail?
You knew that I wanted to say something. You were listening. You were listening. So I would say that courage actually resides in the listening, and I've been so aware of that these past couple of weeks. I've just been I'd say these last couple of weeks with many of you, some of you know, I've just been going through a very difficult period of time with my son right now, and I would say that in the last week or so, I have probably been the most courageous that I have ever been in my entire life. To the point where I had to take some very drastic measures, some very difficult measures. But you know, it was all in the listening. I knew I had to do it because I was listening. I was listening to my son. I was listening to my inside. You know, it was all from the listening. And so I took this measure, I did something, and an action happened. I don't want to go into all the personal details of it, at least right now, but it was in each moment, you know, it was really kind of a very just a challenging time, and things were changing all the time, and my son was kind of out of control, and it was really difficult. And so each time I had all these difficult decisions to make, and I work at home, and my husband of course was very involved, but he was off at work, so I had a lot of decisions that I would have thought, well, I want to make this decision with him, you know. I mean, I couldn't because he wasn't home, and I had to make it, and each decision took me to the next decision and the next decision and the next decision, and yeah, it just seemed like things have like shifted remarkably. Like almost I'm still sort of completely in awe of how things have changed. And that's not to say I have no idea what's going to happen, you know, tomorrow or the next day. It's not like I have any kind of expectations, but I'm just so aware. And I know I say this every week, and it's the reason why I just was so drawn to being in the Skywire squad in the first place, is that listening for me is my life, it's my core, and I was, again, there's no guarantees of what's going to happen tomorrow, but it's the shift that has happened with my son is so startling and so incredible. And it was because of the listening. You know, it's like I know that I brought that. Like I have been his mom, and I have been listening like so hard to what does he need? You know, what does he need? And what do I need? And what are the needs, not only his need and my need, but what are all the needs of the situation? You know, because a lot of times needs conflict with each other more often than not, you know, and somebody has to take the stand. For me, it was myself as the mother, and also just who I am as a person. I had to take all these different conflicting needs at the same time and try to, like, harmonize them, if you will. Try to come up with, well, what's really needed? If A doesn't need B and B doesn't need A, and everything is conflicting with each other, then what do? You know? And so the answer is in the listening, and it's step by step. And that's how it is.
Wow. That was perfect. That described listening to a T. Listening to the whole movie, listening to the difference between the needs, listening to the difference between just a need and a want, right? There's a big difference there. Sometimes we
Yeah.
use the same word, but it's not the same thing.
We should have a show about that, by
Yes,
the
maybe
way.
that'll be that next week. What is the difference? Next week's show. Yay, got it. Done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Do you all agree? A shake a head. Well, because there's a big difference between need and want.
I didn't hear it. What's next week's show? I was doing comments.
Listening to the difference between need and want.
Mm.
That's
And that
cool.
came from Gail.
Just now, right?
Okay, well that was not her big one, but
Wasn't a big one.
but that's pretty cool, Gail.
What did you? Oh, hold on, don't go where. What did you hear as the big one? What did you
No,
hear?
I said we haven't heard the big one from
Oh,
Gail yet.
I gotcha. I thought you heard
That was
something.
good.
Okay, I thought you heard something bigger in what she said than I heard. So
Now that was just a small one. She is so relaxed and she is so cool right now that something's gonna be very,
oh,
very
okay.
profound.
Okay, so
And she's
then
not gonna know it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's hold off. Let's put that on the parking lot for next week.
Got
And
it written down.
if by the time we're done, if we all agree that that's where we should go. But you did a beautiful job explaining that, Gail. That was really great because you heard what you have to do, what listening does for you, and what you have to do for listening.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing, Marilyn.
Yes.
And I know that I said this already, but I want to bring out the point, or I want to emphasize it, and I'm really emphasizing it for myself just as much as everybody else. It's just that really like the miracles that can happen with the listening when you're really in tune with the flow and what's needed, no matter how difficult it is. Like things change, things happen when you're listening. And that's the kind of life I want to live.
Makes it a lot easier, doesn't it?
Well, it's tough, but it's right. It's like when you're in the flow. For myself personally, that's what I live for. It's not about getting things and having materialistic things. It's about recognizing what that flow is and being in the flow, because to me that's really where the joy comes from. It's like that joy welling up from within, knowing that I am a part of this flow, and the power, the power, that's it. It's the power that comes from this, the power that we have through the listening. I'm not talking about manipulation or control here, which is that's very base, that's where I think most people live. It's really in that world of survival, and we're happy when good things happen to us, and we're sad when bad things happen to us, all very much dependent on how we're affected by things that are outside of us. But when we're connected to the flow, and we can really recognize the power, the divine power of what really is, that to me is so much more joyful and powerful than being happy that something good happened to me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things you said was that you're learning. And I think, make no mistake, anybody that's listening, watching, who happens to come upon this, if not for me, then for who? We've done that before. We did that quote, right, a long time ago, or not a long time ago, but if not for me, then who am I here for? And if not now, when, right? So I've got to be here. I have got to be here for myself so that I can be here for the world. So we have to take this stuff on, because my listening journey is going to be different than some of yours, than all of yours, every day. We're connected. What's going on for me may be similar to what's going on, but I have to take it in my way, just like you do. So we are all, taking this in, and learning for ourselves as well. So Gail, you've put it into, you know, I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your just how you have lived it so that you can share it the way you have, because obviously having that personal experience has been, you know, gut wrenching on many levels, but at the same time, you see, you've gotten to see. So, Jamie.
Yeah, well, just fantastic thoughts coming up. Just listening to the other lady speaking, and just a few things I would really like to say up to this point. Really, just going back to that quote that you mentioned at the beginning from somebody, I can't remember who it was, who said courage doesn't necessarily roar. Well, I think that was the quote, right? Something like that. Um, I think that's so true. That's so true. Courage can arise within you in a very gentle, subtle way, and I guess that's tied in with listening. Listening itself can be really subtle. It's quiet, it's still, it's subtle, and that is how courage, I think, can come into your situation. So yeah, courage doesn't roar. It's just this gentle but strong flow that comes through you. Um, and I also just wanted to comment on something which Heidi said, which I caught my ear. I think Heidi, I understood you said that courage it came to you naturally in some moments. It's sort of a natural thing. It doesn't always have to be something that you really need to kind of psych yourself up for. Sometimes it can just come naturally, and I guess that's a reflection of when you're really in tune with your listening, is how courage can just be a natural part of the next step in your situation. And that reminds me also a little bit of some experiences which I've had with courage and listening, and also from what Gail said about how sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you have no choice but to fall back on courage. And I think courage can come in at least two forms. Like, for example, you can be in a situation where you are kind of obliged or even forced to go through some really difficult, traumatic situation. You have no choice. You just got to go through it. And when that happens to you, you realize that you have courage to get through it. There was no choice involved. You just had to go through it. And when you came out the other side, you realize that you're not dead. You realize that you're still alive. You survived. And in that moment, you realize how important courage is. And on the other hand, you can be in a situation where I think this is definitely to do with listening. You can be listening, and your intuition or your higher self kind of tells you what you need to do, and you listen to it, and you're very clear about it, but it can be sometimes something very frightening. It may be presenting you a path or a choice that you know is the best thing to do, but it's very frightening. It may involve doing something that you wouldn't like to do, or that would make you feel uncomfortable, and that's when you need to make a choice. And in that moment, making a choice can be really difficult, because it's easy to make a choice for something that's easy. But when you're listening and your intuition is telling you to do something, that's when you really need the courage to be able to do it. And I think this is that came up in the show last week, is that when you are listening, you also get those resources which give you the courage. So you get the feeling of love, the feeling of guidance, the feeling of that you're not alone, the feeling that there's some greater force within you that is helping you. And that, for me, gives you the courage to make a choice to follow the path that your listening is telling you to follow, even when it goes against your conditioning, or it goes against what other people are expecting of you. And that's when you get the courage to go through with it, if that makes any sense.
Makes sense. Right now, I'm sitting here observing all of you, listening to all of you. And I know, Marguerite, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. You're next. But I am sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, every week I come, I'm in the show and I'm getting the chills. Today, it's different. We have crossed over some kind of something. We are into something right here, right now, where I don't know about any of you, but I'm like sitting here and I'm like, I need each and every one of you to speak. I need to be with each and every one of you. I need to hear what you have to say. Something we're tapped into something, a clarity. Each and every one of you are tapped into some kind of new clarity. Like we've taken a leap of somewhere where we have not been yet. We've been touching, but we're at the next milestone. That's what I'm feeling. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. I don't know. Marguerite?
Yes. Well, in the last 2 days, I've had to rely on my courage because I had very much pain in the head, couldn't think, and I'm thinking about what Jamie said. That was right on the bat, because when you're just laying there in the bed and can't really think, you can't do anything, you can't even stand up, you can't even eat anything. The only thing that remains is the courage and the listening. I mean, I guess this whatever happened to me was for my benefit. I'm convinced of it. I've seen that to some degree already, that I needed to come back to baseline from all the busy things I've done, and listening to my body and see what it needs. I've neglected my body, I'm sure. Otherwise, I would probably not have gone there to be in that state. So being in white space, let's say, that's what I can call it, it's like when the thinking doesn't work, the brain doesn't work, but the energy of courage is there. And that's very reassuring because, okay, I'm just going to wait this out. I'm just going to stay put and just wait, be patient. And I feel that this morning in our hangout with Heidi and our guest, Adele Michelle, she did a clearing in the hangout, and I felt better. I mean, this is very beautiful that I can hardly stand up or sit up, and then my guest or our guest helps us to do a clearing. I mean, and I feel better. So I wasn't going to participate today, but I felt as well that I could do it. So that's courage, I think, without pushing my body. I think also that in some cases that when I have courage, that's battling the ego to do something I feel very deeply about. It's like getting outside of your box. I mean, for any kind of really passionate goals that we may have, if you apply courage in the right way, then you're going to get there. And I went through this process in this week, holding that thought. That's probably the only thought I could have.
Wow. I think, when you were speaking, I felt there's something going on with us here, that there's a stillness. This is like, I feel like we're living in one moment, period. And there's a stillness. And I'm flabbergasted on some level, and maybe this is just a personal thing, but being the holder of listening in so many cases for myself and out here, to be amongst all of you, that I feel like I've been not protecting listening, but holding its value, and I feel like I can let it go. Sheila, is that you?
That's amazing that you would say that, because you have found others who feel the same way, express it in a different way, but come to the same conclusion. So it is a release of, I can share this. I don't have to let it go for myself, but I can share this, and then it will multiply and it will go out, and so the responsibility of spreading the word is less because you have more people that feel the same way. I do want to say something about what Jamie said. I think, and I don't have it now because I didn't stop to write it down. I did remember that we were recording the video and I could go back so I could stop taking notes. But what Jamie did was define courage. He just simply defined what it was when you said all of those elements, and I can't repeat them, all of those elements that come together, and he said you get courage. And I wanted to disagree with him. I don't think you get courage. I think it's there, and when all of those elements come together, you experience the courage, which is what Heidi was talking about, because I certainly related to what she said about I've just always taken the steps I needed to go, and I've never thought of it as courage. And I think that's right. I think that's the way I feel it too. Heidi, can you still hear me? Yes? Okay, good. Because you've come into the film strip twice, but that's fine. But so I agree with Heidi that I don't think that I actually have courage. But now to hear Jamie's explanation of it and definition of it, I do embrace courage, and it comes to me when I need it. So that was very profound for me. Thank you, Jamie.
So that's everything. Everything is already there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everything is already there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Katrina, you've been listening.
Yes.
Do your thing.
Holy moly. What I loved about every part of the conversation so far is that I would absolutely feel confident for having each of these people speak for me as that definition, that part of the definition of courage that would resonate with me. And that's really amazing. It's everything they said. I was like, I totally agree. I totally agree. To add my own little spin on this, I would say that with courage, sometimes it's just as much about knowing and like sort of that deep listening, that feeling, that knowing that maybe action isn't the way right now. I think a lot of people think of courage as taking action and bucking up and moving forward, and sometimes courage is knowing that you have to tune in and listen, but that might be all you can do in that moment. And so the action of that action may come, it may not, but you're getting the information that you need to really sit with and learn from and sort of take it all in parts of your entire being so that when the time comes, you're ready to be courageous, or maybe you've just shifted that dynamic so it's not necessarily a courageous thing, it's just the thing. It's the next step. It's what you do. I feel for a lot of folks, it's once you get past that fear part, right? Because that's part of the courage too, is that sometimes you feel the fear in those steps. Beyond that, feel like you have to be courageous. I think there's an honoring that you have when you really listen to yourself. It's appreciating that you're taking that time, that you're honoring yourself first, and so that right action will be clear in a way that feels like it's coming from a place of love and not fear. And so sometimes the most courageous thing to do is nothing but listen.
Right. That's it. And you know what? I was going to say that. And I was just waiting. I was listening to everything you were saying, and I'm like, when I listen, I listen in like you would in paragraphs. I listen in sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So I listen to a piece and I hear something and it stays. And I listen to the next piece or paragraph. I hear it, then that piece stays, and then I put them together. So I was waiting and listening to the next piece and then you just said it. That's what I mean. That was great. So you're welcome, and I want to encourage anyone that's listening, watching, listening, hearing us, wherever you are, to please, if you like to comment, ask a question, get in on the conversation. We'd love to have you participate. So I want to talk about the idea of vulnerability, because, being courageous opens us up to being vulnerable. And I think very recently, vulnerable has taken a shift. Now people are talking a lot about it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be out of your box. It's okay not to have it all, to know it all, to be it all, and to be vulnerable, to be caught with your pants down. It's okay. So I'd like to talk about what that means in relationship to courage. So Heidi, you were I started with you. I'm going to come back to you. What do you think?
I think for me, I think I know it was a big step to become vulnerable because I was always tough. I was taught to be, always controlling the situation. And I sort of beginning to learn that. And I think without the vulnerability, I couldn't be who I really am because I would always have a mask, trying to be somebody who I'm not. I still, I still have a measurement to know where I can be vulnerable and where I cannot, where I can show it and where I cannot. Because there are certain situations you better hide and put a mask on. So I think we need to have this distinction because otherwise we need to protect ourselves in some way, but not in the way which we thought we needed it. So we can, as you said, get our pants down when it's a safe environment. So I'm very appreciating to be able to be so.
So we get to make the choice of what does being vulnerable mean anyway? What does vulnerable really mean? And we get to be the choice. Sometimes it's just the awareness and the listening. And we don't have to share it with anybody, just like courage. Just you don't have to take any action that anybody's going to see. You just know it and hear. And maybe they do feel it because obviously people can read your energy and feel your energy and get it even if they don't know it. But, vulnerable is a choice. And just to make the choice that it's okay to be vulnerable doesn't mean you have to be vulnerable in every minute. Gail?
There's so many things to say, just based on what you just asked. Like, I don't even know which one to pick. There's just so many.
Well, you've been vulnerable. You have been vulnerable this week. Because when you've been listening, right, you have been vulnerable because you don't have the answer. You have to make a choice. You have to try something in being courageous that you don't have proof of.
Okay.
You had to do it without your husband at times. And it's one thing to go ahead and say, what do you think? But it's another thing to just trust yourself, go out there and be vulnerable to whatever happens.
Yeah. Okay. So two things. One, I would say that vulnerability and courage are really the opposite sides of the same coin. Because if you wouldn't have to be courageous if you weren't being vulnerable. I mean, it's really the same. It's really the same thing. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I think that your question of, well, what does it mean to be vulnerable? Again, I think that makes another whole show. I think that's an incredibly profound question, and I think that we can look at that in a lot of different ways. Like you were saying, well, we don't, if we're vulnerable, that doesn't mean we have to be vulnerable in every second. Of course, that's absolutely true. But I think, and that's just part of living and responding, by the listening, knowing what you need to do now. And what do you need to do now? Sometimes you just need to just not be vulnerable and go make your coffee or, whatever it is. But I think in terms of what does it mean to really be vulnerable in the deepest sense, I think it means acknowledging who you really are and acknowledging who you are really in relation to life, because we are not in control of this life. There are certain things we are in control of, but we are not in control of the ocean and the tide and nature and what's going to happen to us, and we're not in control of dying. That's going to happen.
Gail, hold on, Gail. So what you're saying is we're vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
We just haven't brought our awareness to the fact that we are vulnerable all the time because we don't know.
Right, but we try to convince ourselves that we're not. So we become control freaks, and we guard our vulnerability, but it's all not true anyway. We're just kidding ourselves. And I mean this in the biggest, in the existential sense. It's not like we should go around being vulnerable every second and like contemplating this, but it's just one level of exploration of it.
Okay, so this is good because this is what we always talk about is obviously is this thing about listening. So the listening part tells us that we're vulnerable all the time, but then the listening part tells us that with our awareness we can take our vulnerability into a conscious state and go into our conscious depth of listening.
Right. And
Right?
I think if we have that awareness that we're vulnerable all the time and we take that with us, we're going to have a different life than without that awareness.
Well, listening gives us a different life anyway.
Exactly.
So perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Jamie?
Yeah, I would totally agree with everything that so far that's been said by Heidi and Gail, and yourself as well. I think I would add to that my own personal perspective. For me, vulnerability is very much a kind of a go-between embracing the human side of our nature and balancing our spiritual side of our nature. For me, it's very much like, on the one hand, to kind of progress spiritually, I believe that you have to embrace your human nature totally, completely. And that means being true to yourself, being sincere with yourself, and to be able to do that, you need to be vulnerable. You need to embrace or accept the fact that you are vulnerable. As you said, and as Gail said, we are vulnerable all the time, even if we're trying to kind of pretend that we're not. So when you do accept that, when you do accept that you're vulnerable all the time, that's kind of, you're allowing yourself to, you're kind of giving yourself permission to express exactly who you are in the world, with the people you interact with your environment. And by doing that, I think you live more in line with yourself, and you're able to express your purpose and your divine purpose as well. So that for me is very much the kind of human side of it, but it balances with the spiritual side of it, which and I think for anyone who is really kind of in tune and connected with their spiritual nature, which involves listening, basically, I think when you're truly listening, you're totally in tune with that. Then I think you kind of realize that, in fact, there's a part of you, which is the kind of the essence of you, which goes beyond vulnerability. In fact, it's actually not vulnerable at all. It's like the part of you that can never be harmed and can never be affected. It's the kind of, some people may believe it to be the immortal or the part that goes on into other incarnations and so on. But it's very much that kind of part which is untouched by anything, and it's deep inside you. So for me, it's very important to embrace both sides of that, to be a complete human being, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because the human is the only thing that can be vulnerable. In the spiritual sense, we're not vulnerable.
Yeah, it's really like the deep paradox of life. I think you really just crystallize it.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. And I know, Sheila, you got a comment there, right? Do you have one?
I do, and I love this comment from Donald Brandt. I'm always I forgot that comment tracker was working. Oh, this is fabulous. I'm always getting caught with my pants down, which I thought was interesting. Just not on the bus, which made it even better. I use humor to diffuse awkward moments. How many of us do that? And I also, while you're thinking about that, I also want y'all to know that I most rudely pinged my friend Rain Dowell. I was listening, and I decided she needed to hear this, so I just pinged her and demanded that she show up. She is now with us, and she thanked me for pinging her. So everyone say hello to Rain. We're glad she's here. And thank you for your comment, Donald. That was priceless. Just not on the bus.
Gotcha. And sometimes you need the humor in a vulnerable, courageous moment to it's like a bridge. It, you know. So
Marilyn,
that's,
I have a
yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a question. I keep getting the two words together, and I seldom do this, but vulnerability and perfectionism. You know how some people want to. Katrina, tell me what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking it. You just shook your head. So you speak. Oh, sorry, Marilyn. I'm
No, go
taking
ahead.
over the
I
show.
don't love listening, and this show. You don't have to apologize. Okay.
Katrina, what do you think about that? I mean, isn't
Well,
that don't we just use perfectionism to hide our vulnerabilities?
yeah, in many ways, yeah. And I look at vulnerability as those teaching moments.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to make everything perfect when you're not feeling that you can show up and do this perfect job, so that vulnerability kind of wiggles in there. So they are kind of that balancing act. The vulnerability is very much your teaching moments, and when we aren't really 100% sure of how we're going to do with something, we feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. That was an excellent question. And obviously, again, I'm going to go into the listening container. That's the road. That's the path. And even if you don't know what the answer is, you just say, okay, I'm going to listen. And whatever piece comes up, and that's what we're all doing. I mean, every single one of us are listening, getting information, sharing it. Next thing we do is we listen, we get information, we share it. Then I listen, you listen, we all listen, and we put all the information, whatever comes to us, together, and that's what we have. That's listening to the movie.
Yeah, and perfectionism is not your super shield against being vulnerable.
That is vulnerable.
Yeah, as much as you might think it doesn't work that way.
No, because you can't be perfect, right? You can't be super
Right.
perfect. So you're going to be vulnerable just trying to be,
Right.
right? So Marguerite, honey, I know you are you're being really courageous in being here and listening as hard as you are and being that stillness. So I really commend you for that. I'm sure you have something to say.
Yes. For any spiritual person or spiritual teacher that I have known, they are always vulnerable. They don't hesitate to share very awkward moments in their life. And that's, I think, is the gauge of whether a person is spiritual or have some kind of connection with their inner self, the higher self, whatever we call it. And I agree with Jamie here about that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So my question is, with a spiritual teacher, and Jamie, you've been a monk. So I mean, that's quite spiritual. I mean, I think I am, but you've been it. So my question is, do you see yourself as, when you're spiritual like that, do you see yourself as vulnerable, or just the people looking at you? Because, if I'm in that spiritual place, I don't think of myself as being vulnerable. But somebody else looking at me, putting themselves in my shoes, doing what I might do, might have the chills and feel vulnerable.
Well, I don't see myself particularly as a spiritual teacher. I wouldn't attain to aspire to be that. If I compare to the spiritual teachers that I've had.
But that's what I'm saying. Do they see themselves? Are they experiencing?
I don't think so. I think they're very aware of what they're doing, and they model how you actually should be.
Right.
We're not hiding it.
Right. We're seeing them based on whatever. We're seeing them as being vulnerable, but they, in their shoes, don't feel that way. Their faith, they're connected. They don't feel fear on any level.
That's true. That particularly one teacher I have, he doesn't show fear. He doesn't have fear. But if there is something like that, he expresses it.
Gotcha.
I mean, I lived with the monk too several years in the early part of this century, And I could say that just to be a monk, it doesn't necessarily, one is not necessarily spiritual. That's the experience I've had for that. I'm not saying anything about you, Jamie, because you seem to be very integrated. So, like listening, courage, vulnerability, it's all spiritual traits. It's when you have somebody who's listening to you, then you respect them. When another person is listening to you and hear your vulnerability and can see it, then you really like that person. If you're courageous and share that courage, then you feel very helped. So that's my experience from my spiritual teachers. They see what I as a small person needs. That's very true. And also they can be harsh, saying you need to do this, and you say, well, wonder why I have to do this, and then after a while when you do it, then you realize, yeah, I really needed to do this. I really, really needed to do it.
That's great. Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you so much for bringing all that up, because you did it in a beautiful way. And we are almost at the end of our hour. I can't believe it. So we're going to, for everybody listening, for everybody tuning in, we're going to continue this enormous, amazing conversation again next week, as we do each and every week. So it's like a cliffhanger for me now. I'm like watching a cliffhanger, and I don't want it to end, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to say next week. So, but in the last few minutes that we have, I would love for each of you to take, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever, and just share just a little bit something else about yourself, about what you're doing, and then how you want to sum up today for you, for everybody. So let's go with, go ahead. Yeah.
May I go first, because I have to leave?
Go.
This has just been wonderful. Jamie, I've enjoyed you being with us so much, and I can't wait for you to come back. I want to hear more about what you've got to say. Gail, I've taken notes. We'll see which one of them is the most profound, because I know you me 30 minutes from now or an hour from now. Because always you have heart. Margarita, I want you to feel better. I want you to rest. I think you already feel better. And the things that you said calmed me. Even in a state where you're not full speed, you still have a calming effect on me. Thank you. Heidi, don't let those technical things get you down. You know what you're doing. You know you're smarter than you think you are, and I know that. I have to run to another scheduled hangout. It's been a joy. I will see y'all all next week. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Thank you. Love you all. Bye-bye.
So Heidi, go.
I cannot add very much. I would have liked to hear a little bit more the story of Jamie, and I hope next week we will have the occasion to do that. I'm just happy to listen to everybody, and especially to today what Gail brought up, and also Margarita now, and Jamie. I really love to hear that, and it's always like an opening, of the mind and of the feeling too, of the whole system. So thank you for that.
Great. Gail?
Well, I really appreciate being here as well. This is just a wonderful, wonderful conversation as always. It has so much meaning for me. It means more to me than most things. So I really appreciate that. It was great having you here, Jamie. And I just, I know that, Heidi, you're not feeling all that well, and Marguerite, you're not feeling all that well, and I've had a, kind of challenging couple of weeks myself, and Kalyani, if you're still there, I know you're not feeling that well physically. And it's just so great to be with each other, however we are, come as you are, in our vulnerability, in our humanness, and it's just wonderful. Thank you.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'd just like to say really thank you so much for this opportunity. Really, I do feel so much like it's a blessing to be in the presence of some really enlightened people. And I can just hear through your words and the way that you're speaking and just the energy that each one of you projects. It's incredibly uplifting, and it provides such a beautiful environment for this kind of conversation where we can really uncover the kind of closer connections with our inner self, with our spirituality. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I'm really looking forward to more shows. As you said, Marilyn, it's very much like a cliffhanger. I'm already waiting for the next episode. Can't wait for it. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, I agree. I can't wait. Thank you, Katrina.
Well, I wanted to say that I'm really happy that Jamie joined us today because I've been hanging out with him for a while, and I know he's a fabulous man, so I'm glad that we've been able to share in that today. But for me, I think it's just listening into what we want to create next. So if it's the vulnerability that we want to listen into, if it's the courage we want to listen into, what pieces are we taking of that whole picture so we can really actually move forward and create something that brings us joy and helps us really connect with that deepest part of our heart.
Listen in. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Marguerite?
Well, I am so very grateful to be part of this community here. And I feel vulnerable. I feel like my courage increasing. I feel that my listening is picked on so that I can see for myself where I should listen more, and something like that. So I will want to thank you, everyone. You've all said very many beautiful things, especially about the vulnerability. I think that was my highlight.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. Vulnerable, after just something you just said now, I'm thinking, vulnerable when you are embarking on something that's new and being courageous, you're feeling that sense of vulnerability, right? And then when you've accomplished it, maybe you don't feel that vulnerable in that in that moment or whatever, but there is that attachment, that feeling of vulnerable. So we're going to decide what we talk about next week, so you'll have to come back and hear it because it is a cliffhanger, because listening is a cliffhanger, because I don't know what we're going to find as we listen in. I don't know. I just don't know. I know what we found so far, but I don't know what's coming. So I'm really, really even more glued to this show, to this hangout, and more dedicated to it than ever before, and sharing it. So I want to thank you all for being here today, and for your continuation and continuance of being vulnerable. I mean, and for everybody that's listening and tuning in, and if anybody wants to connect with us after the show, another day, please let us know what's going on for you, because that's how we're going to make this bigger and bigger and bigger. So thank you all very much for being here, and we will be back next week with the next episode of Skywire. Bye.